Once she was an infamous empress. At her funeral, her husband left only 8 words: "Only regret we ever met. Mutual destruction, mutual ruin." Reborn at a spring lakeside banquet, watching him struggle in the water, she simply adjusted her sleeves and walked away. How does it feel this time? These were the words of Zhang Zhao, the minister who died for her in that previous life. From risking everything to save him to walking away without a glance. From pining for an emperor to marrying a failed scholar. She finally understood meeting was the greatest mistake, letting go the wisest choice. Welcome to Chamber Tales of Survival. I am Echo Joe, and I'll take my time telling you this story of lives intertwined across lifetimes. In my previous life, I was reviled as Empress. The Empress Dowager accused me of malice born from jealousy, declaring me unvirtuous for bearing no heir. Court officials condemned me for meddling in state affairs, calling me tyrannical and domineering. Even my husband Wei Yan, for whom I'd sacrificed everything, penned these words at my memorial: "Only regret we ever met. Mutual destruction, mutual ruin." A mere 8 characters to obliterate our decade of marriage, our half-lifetime of entangled love and hate. When I opened my eyes again, it was the spring banquet. He floundered in the lake, struggling and crying for help. This time, I simply looked away, drew my sleeves close, and walked along the embankment through the spring scenery, utterly indifferent. Wei Yan came calling on a day when storm clouds threatened. He'd come specifically to express gratitude. Though I hadn't leapt into the water to save him at the spring banquet, I had sent palace servants to fish him out. No, the palace buzzed with gossip about how Miss Xue had been sharp-eyed and kind, hearted enough to save a prince's life. My parents, keen to encourage the match, made themselves scarce, leaving us alone together in the flower hall. Wei Yan was wrapped in heavy fox fur, his face pale as parchment, faint bruise, like shadows beneath his eyes. I'd heard that after his dunking, he'd developed a dangerous fever and been confined to bed ever since. Perhaps the illness hadn't fully lifted. His eyes seemed veiled by a thin mist, and when he looked at me so quietly, it created an illusion of tenderness. He cradled his teacup and asked gently, "Miss Xue, ere I cannot adequately repay this life, saving grace, is there anything you desire?" I lowered my gaze to sip my tea, expression bland. "Your Highness is too kind. The silks and paintings you've sent these past days have already filled half a storeroom." Wei Yan shook his head slightly. The teacup met the rosewood table with a crisp tap. "Those are mere formalities, ultimately insufficient." He raised his eyes, gaze burning. "Just name it." He'd always been this sort of flawlessly courteous gentleman. In my previous life, I'd leapt into the icy lake to save him without hesitation. Upon waking, he'd petitioned for an imperial marriage decree, full ceremonial rites, every possible honor, giving me complete face. This time I'd merely shouted for help, yet he remained equally insistent about proper gratitude. Since that was the case, "If your Highness truly insists on thanking me, I've heard the new jewelry set from Yu Linling is quite exquisite." His long lashes trembled almost imperceptibly. That jewelry set. In my previous life, I'd adored it, but hesitated over the price. Eventually, someone else purchased it, and I'd regretted it for ages. Later, Wei Yan somehow learned of this and presented me the following month with an even more expensive set of ruby, adorned hairpins and gold ornaments. Unfortunately, that priceless jewelry eventually met the floor in my fury. Gold threads snapped, pearls and jade scattered everywhere. He stood amidst the wreckage, silent for a long while before saying quietly, "If you are upset, take it out on me. Why destroy things?" That day, the Empress Dowager had installed 2 more beauties in his chambers. My blood boiled, rationality fled. His words only added fuel to the fire. I'd gone mad, smashing his possessions, ink stones, jade pieces, antiques. Eventually, Wei Yan stopped speaking. He simply waited quietly until I exhausted myself, then ordered everything replaced. That wasn't indulgence, it was weariness. A deep helplessness toward this marriage riddled with wounds, toward me, his impossible wife. Now, in the flower hall, tea fragrance drifted, he asked. Only this, I nodded, voice firm. Only this. Wei Yan's gaze lingered on my face, as if searching for something. Finally, he agreed. Very well. As he departed, his fox fur brushed the threshold, stirring a cold draft. He suddenly paused and looked back. Daylight streamed behind him, rendering his refined features indistinct. His lips moved as if holding 1,000 words, ultimately producing only, "Spring's chill lingers. Take care, Miss Xue." I bowed my head in courtesy without a word. Within 2 days, the jewelry arrived, along with several boxes of exceptionally fine hairpins, spread across the table in radiant splendor. Mother held the most valuable ornament against my temple, her expression delighted. See, the second prince has truly put thought into this. In the bronze mirror, gold threads wound around rubies, their glow illuminating my young face. This had once been my heart's desire. I reached up to touch the cool tassels, their chill traveling from fingertips straight to my heart. Mother, I said, looking at my reflection. What if I no longer wish to become the second prince's consort? Mother's hand froze mid-air. The room's brilliant radiance turned deathly silent in an instant. What nonsense are you spouting? Mother lowered her voice, startled and uncertain. The Empress Dowager approves. His Highness is willing. This is a match you couldn't find with a lantern. But I don't want it. Why not? Mother gripped my hand tightly, urgently. Yishu, has the second prince done something wrong? I remained silent, my thoughts drifting back to my previous life. After my death, my spirit didn't dissipate but lingered by Wei Yan's side for 10 full days. I watched him draft my posthumous title, enhance my tomb specifications, expand my funeral ceremonies, coldly rejecting every Ministry of Rites objection about exceeding protocol. The Empress labored for the nation in life. In death, she deserves the highest honors. But beyond these public displays, he attended court, reviewed memorials, took meals, and slept. Everything as usual, disturbingly calm, moan evening. He even methodically consumed a bowl of bird's nest soup sent by consort Chen, so composed as if the deceased weren't his wife but some inconsequential stranger. That night I stood by his bed and cursed him. I cursed his hypocrisy, his heartlessness, until my own voice broke with tears. Perhaps he heard my weeping, for one night he suddenly jerked awake and sat bolt upright. I startled backward, thinking I'd actually woken him. No candles burned. In the darkness, I heard only his heavy, labored breathing. He sat there for ages, then suddenly rose, walked to his desk, and prepared ink and paper. I drifted over to watch. He lifted his brush, dipped it in ink. The tip trembled slightly above the paper. Asterisk Empress Xue, given name Yishu, second daughter of Minister Xue, brilliant as dawn blossoms, unmatched in all the realm. Asterisk, he wrote of how I'd championed new policies against all opposition, established orphanages for abandoned children. He documented my disaster relief efforts, my eradication of corruption, my replenishment of state coffers, every endeavor, all my life's work. When I'd undertaken these things, they'd brought countless accusations and curses. A hen crowing at dawn, a demon empress bringing ruin, tyrannical and domineering. Even Wei Yan and I had fought bitterly over them time and again. The candle wick crackled softly. With my accomplishments recorded, only our personal grievances remained. Asterisks, the Empress and I married young, 10 years as husband and wife. Asterisk, just that single line. Wei Yan paused for a long while, ink bleeding into a dark blot on the paper. He seemed lost in profound memory. The candle burned down section by section, light and shadow dancing across his face. Eventually he blinked, lifted his brush, and wrote the final 2 lines. Asterisk, yet fate's turns led us to separation like distant stars. Asterisk, asterisk, reflecting on the past. Only regret we met. Mutual destruction, mutual ruin. Asterisk, 10 years married, half a lifetime entangled. Love or hate, those bonds grown together from flesh and blood. He casually struck them through with one phrase, regret we met. I wanted to cry from rage, but my throat felt blocked, because he was right. Had we never met, He'd have married some dignified, virtuous lady from a great family, eventually making her empress. She would have managed his harem, borne him legitimate sons, done everything I couldn't or wouldn't do, and perhaps I'd have married someone of suitable status. Perhaps I'd have remained unwed, traveling the land. Either way, I wouldn't have been trapped within those red palace walls, forced to watch him take concubine after concubine. Wouldn't have choked down bowl after bitter bowl of fertility medicine, only to watch blood stain my skirts on a day of heavy snow, despair flooding through me. Her greatest mistake was meeting at all. All the suspicion, resentment, torment, it all stemmed from that first glimpse, that moment of eternal recognition. My thoughts returned to the present. I gently withdrew my hand from Mother's grasp and said softly, "Please, Mother, let me be willful just this once." When Father learned of my decision, he paced his study, profoundly agitated. "Child, how can you treat the second prince so callously?" I was momentarily speechless. How had he managed to apply the phrase callously abandoned to royalty? "I simply feel the second prince isn't a suitable match." "Then who is?" "The crown prince, the third prince." "I won't marry anyone." "Ridiculous." Father's beard practically bristled with indignation. My brother chose that moment to enter and mediate. "Yishu, tell your brother honestly, what is really wrong?" He asked if the second prince had treated me poorly. "Not entirely. As young newlyweds, we'd had harmonious times. But then he became emperor. Imperial husband and wife could never be like ordinary folk. Deep affection required balancing court factions. Arguments involved the front hall and inner palace. Even laughter and tears were watched, calculated, weighed by countless eyes. I raised my gaze and said quietly, "I just feel that if I marry him, I'll never be happy for the rest of my life." My brother paused, startled, then nodded in agreement. Fair point. He pulled up a chair and sat. "His Highness's temperament is rather stifling. Fine for friendship, but as a husband he'd likely suffocate you." Father glared at him. "What is wrong with quiet? When you argue later, at least he won't win, and he'll have to accommodate you." Brother laughed. "Father, with his Highness's tight-lipped disposition, he won't win arguments. True. But he'll probably give Yishu a bellyful of frustration first." The two began bickering back and forth. I seized the opportunity to slip quietly from the study. At dinner, Father remained silent throughout. Only near the end did he set down his chopsticks, voice somewhat hoarse. "Yishu," he paused for a long while, gaze settling on the steam rising from the soup bowl, suddenly looking aged. "If you truly don't wish it," he exhaled a long, heavy sigh, "then we'll let it go." Mother's hand trembled, her spoon clinking against the bowl. I lowered my head, staring at the distinct grains of rice in my bowl, my nose suddenly stinging. For some time afterward, life proceeded smoothly. I continued attending flower banquets and poetry gatherings at various estates, frolicking at the polo grounds. In my previous life, during palace banquets, I'd had to sit rigidly in the seat of honor, maintaining the Empress's dignity at every moment. Back straight as a rod, even lifting chopsticks required impeccable grace. Now I was free. On spring outings, I picked peach blossoms for wine. Making during hunts, I was first to ride into the forest. At gatherings, I could chat freely without measuring every word. When tired, I'd find a corner to lounge casually. I'd eat a plate of fresh pastries, and if crumbs clung to my lips, no one cared. No one criticized. Brother mentioned that the second prince had been quite busy lately, often assisting the crown prince with state affairs. Occasionally glimpsing him from afar, he was indeed always at the crown prince's side, wearing sky blue court robes, jade crown binding his hair, eyes slightly lowered as he listened to discussions, his profile solitary and aloof. At one polo match, our team won a round. Gripping my mallet, I laughed and demanded my prize. Turning casually, I spotted Wei Yan standing beneath the willows at the field's edge. He gazed quietly in this direction, his eyes passing through the noisy crowd to rest on me. That look was heavy, not like watching lively sport. more like looking through my present vivacious self to see some distant figure only he knew. My heart inexplicably tightened. I nimbly dismounted and dove into the cluster of young ladies to eat shaved ice. Among them, noblewoman whispered, "It is already mid-spring. Why does the second prince still wear that heavy cloak constantly?" More than that, my brother visited the Eastern Palace the other day and saw the second prince standing in a draft. After just a few words, he started coughing. The crown prince frantically summoned physicians. Strange, his health used to be quite robust. My hand holding the silver spoon paused briefly before I continued scooping ice as if nothing had happened. The Dragon Boat Festival Palace banquet was one I truly couldn't avoid. Imperial family and prominent officials' households all attended. I kept my head lowered, toying with the exquisite rice dumpling on my plate, constantly sensing a gaze following me like a shadow along my spine. Yet whenever I looked up to search for it, the hall buzzed with laughter, everyone toasting and drinking. That gaze would vanish into the clinking cups and cheerful conversation, elusive and impossible to catch. After the banquet began, brother leaned close behind his fan, whispering, "What is actually going on between you and the second prince?" "Nothing, nothing." Brother raised an eyebrow, jerking his chin. "Then why does he stare at you like that? His eyes are practically glued to you." I instinctively turned to look. Wei Yan's gaze cut through the shifting crowd and collided directly with mine. Our eyes met. This time, he didn't look away. Distant dragon boat drums thundered, making my heart inexplicably burn. He continued watching me slowly, very slightly. He blinked once, then lowered his gaze and drained his cup in one swallow. I quickly averted my eyes, palms breaking into a thin sweat. "Yishu?" Brother touched my arm. I looked down, slowly peeling apart the long cold rice dumpling. Sweet glutinous rice mixed with bamboo leaf fragrance, yet it stirred no appetite. "It is nothing," I forced composure, voice oddly steady. "Perhaps His Highness has had a few too many cups today. He is drunk." Midway through the banquet, I simply couldn't sit still any longer. Excusing myself to freshen up, I rose and left to catch my breath. But at the palace corridors turning, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. "Miss Xue." Wei Yan's voice carried a slight panting, as if he'd rushed to catch up. I had no escape and could only turn to Bo. "Your Highness, he'd drunk considerably today." A faint flush colored his eyes, softening his usual coldness while adding a fragile quality. "That jewelry set," he began, voice low and rough. "Why have I never seen you wear it?" I hadn't expected him to pursue me for this and paused, startled, too heavy, inconvenient for moving about. He made a soft sound of acknowledgement, then after a moment's silence continued, "If it doesn't suit you, we can exchange it for something else. I have another set at my residence. Your Highness misunderstands. The jewelry is excellent." I interrupted, keeping my voice steady and distant. "Your Highness has already repaid the life-saving debt. This humble woman has received undeserved rewards and dares not accept more gifts." He seemed not to understand my rejection, staring at me dazedly for some time. A draft howled through the corridor just then, whipping up his thin robe. Wei Yan suddenly turned aside, covering his mouth as violent coughing seized him. The sound was suppressed yet agonized, each cough worse than the last, his shoulders trembling slightly. When it finally subsided, the flush at his eyes had deepened, his voice completely hoarse. "After the spring banquet's dunking, my health hasn't recovered. I can't tolerate drafts. Forgive me for this unseemly display, Miss Xue." I kept my eyes lowered, watching our shadows stretched long by the setting sun, slightly overlapping on the ground. "Then your Highness should take better care of his precious health. I take my leave." This time he didn't call out to stop me. As I turned to go, the wind carried an extremely soft murmur. "You never used to call yourself this humble woman." Upon returning home, I immediately had someone investigate. Wei Yan had always enjoyed robust health. Though I hadn't jumped in at the spring banquet, I'd shouted for help promptly enough. It shouldn't have left such severe after effects. When the maid returned that evening with her report, her expression was peculiar indeed. Miss that day the second prince seemed possessed. When servants tried to pull him out, he refused, insisting it was hot and he wanted to soak a while longer to cool off. He drove everyone far away and soaked in that icy lake for nearly half a shekin. Finally, the crown prince got word and rushed over to have him forcibly removed. They say when he came out, his lips were purple, his whole body shaking uncontrollably, and even then he smiled at the crown prince. The maid went on about summoning masters to exorcise evil spirits, but I'd stopped listening. Own thought exploded in my mind. Wei Yan couldn't swim at this point. He'd only learned after we married in the previous life. I'd taught him myself. He'd come back too. I spent 3 full days verifying this. Wei Yan's recent court maneuvers had been dramatic. Flood control, rooting out corruption, military reform, every single measure precisely timed before disasters struck, as if divinely guided. Even the crown prince's faction was astonished, privately remarking that the second prince seemed like a different person lately, decisive and ruthless, unnaturally seasoned. As for his attitude toward me, my first thought, he is unwell. In his previous life, he'd probably lived to a ripe old age. Spend enough time lonely on the dragon throne, and a man goes mad old, idle, holding the world yet feeling empty. He'd started dwelling on the past, regretting this, owing that, and when finally closing his eyes, thinking, "Oh, there is also that first Empress I made into an enemy." Opening his eyes again in youth, blood rushing to his head, he'd decided to make amends. Then a second thought slithered out like a viper. He wants to use the Xue family. Wei Yan still belonged to the crown prince's faction, lacking his own power base, to shake up entrenched court corruption. The crown prince wouldn't necessarily support everything, and the emperor had to balance interests. He needed reliable hands, and the Xue family was the sharpest blade available. He'd used us extensively in the previous life. Surely we'd be just as handy this time. This explanation made perfect sense. On the 4th day, I laid my cards on the table with my family. I needed to find a husband. Wei Yan's guilt-driven impulse to compensate would fade eventually, but he'd never easily release his grip on the Xue family blade. I had to find a shield before he made his move, to prevent complications. Previously, I'd chased Wei Yan openly, creating a citywide spectacle everyone knew about. No pivoting to marry another would inevitably invite gossip. Finding a suitable, appropriate match among the capital's great families would be difficult. But looking beyond the capital, the world opened up. My maternal family in Jiangnan had written repeatedly, recommending local young talents of clean background and decent appearance. But none appealed to me, brother exasperated asked, "What exactly are you looking for? I'll help you search." I considered, then stated my requirements quite frankly. First, handsome. Second, poor. Third, gentle and easily managed. Brother gaped at me, speechless for quite some time. 3 days later, he left the capital on business. Upon return, he'd actually brought someone. Parents deceased, modest assets, gentle and agreeable temperament. As for appearance, absolutely first-rate. I lifted the bamboo curtain and looked where he indicated. Late spring drizzle fell fine and dense. The man stood on the courtyard stone pavement, holding an oil paper umbrella. Plain blue robes, washed nearly white, couldn't conceal his upright bearing, elegant as bamboo. The umbrella tilted slightly, revealing a clean, refined jawline. Sensing the gaze, he slowly raised his eyes. The instant our eyes met, I froze completely. Eve drip beads fell in strings, shattering into flowers. It was Zhang Zhao, or rather, a still Yang Zhang Zhao, not yet worn by hardship. In my previous life, I'd first met Zhang Zhao in my 3rd year as Empress. That year, I'd miscarried unexpectedly and injured myself badly. Force-fed bitter medicine for 6 solid months before barely managing to get out of bed. When Wei Yan came to visit, he'd stand outside the screen to inquire after my health, voice distant and detached. The Xue family was also being viciously attacked by the censorate over an old case. Father and brother walked on eggshells at court, their position precarious. With no one to turn to, I could only reach out myself for support. Wei Yan tacitly permitted my interference in government, perhaps from guilt, perhaps thinking a mere palace woman couldn't stir up much trouble. Initially just harmless greeting memorials, gradually involving actual administration, personnel, finances. Sitting behind the curtain, I heard every buzzing court discussion clearly. A hen crowing at dawn, disrupting government. That is what they called me. Zhang Zhao was the first minister to actively seek alliance. That day snow fell heavily. He knelt outside the hall, reciting word perfect several memorials I'd reviewed. He spoke of long-term benefits, far-sightedness, how others were short-sighted. Even my calligraphy, he claimed, showed backbone. His voice rang clear and strong, each phrase sounding like rehearsed lines. After he finished, I ordered the screens removed. Minister Zhang, I wish to hear the truth. His voice faltered. The howling wind and snow outside suddenly grew distinct. The practiced deference in his eyes slowly faded. Beneath it lay a sharp edge, ambition that refused to bow to fate. He remained silent for ages until I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he exhaled deeply. Your Majesty, I have no path left. Spent half my life studying the classics, stumbled into office, only to find I clash with His Majesty at every turn. My examination cohort has all risen high, while I remain stuck at this 6th rank position, unable to advance. His Adam's apple bobbed, voice dropping yet each word ringing firm. I refused to accept it. Desperate, he decided to try this side door. That day, I offered him hot tea. Thereafter, he became the sharpest, most useful blade in my hand. He schemed against political enemies for me, took blame on my behalf, dismantled countless open attacks and hidden arrows. The two of us working in concert at court earned us the label colluding wolves. Zhang Zhao had regrets, often privately beating his chest. I really boarded your pirate ship with no way off. I calmly sipped tea. You can still jump now. He paused, then smiled bitterly. Forget it. What? The ship's already mid-river, too late to turn back. I told him to get back to work then, sighing. He resignedly drafted memorials. The next day at court, he'd still clash verbally with those old ministers on my behalf, yielding not an inch. When my health failed, I began arranging escape routes for those around me. Father retired to the countryside. Brother took a post in the provinces, far from the capital's troubles. Wei Yan wouldn't move against the Xue family for our marriage's sake, but I couldn't vouch for those court officials nursing long grudges. I drafted Zhang Zhao's transfer orders too, demoted to a remote stable posting where he might preserve his life. The decree ready. I handed it to him. He wouldn't take it. I am not leaving. I leaned against my pillow, gasping. Times change, past or present. Say me to me. He knelt by the bed, voice low and steady. If I leave, how will you manage at court? I said I had others beneath me. I didn't need him specifically. He smiled, eyes utterly clear. Those fence, sitters, can you rely on them? I fell silent. Too many enemies. When the tree falls, everyone pushes. If I fell ill and he left, they'd devour me down to the bones. He suddenly prostrated himself, forehead lightly touching the cold floor in formal obeisance. In my youth, I read a poem. Repay my lord's golden terrace trust. I'll raise my jade dragon sword and die for him. I froze. He raised his head, eyes holding a calm yet burning light. If it truly comes to that, I'll accompany you. I coughed violently in fury. Such a brilliantly clever man, yet his brain short-circuited at the crucial moment. Loyalty to emperor, loyalty to nation, but loyalty to a dying empress later. I died. His ending probably wasn't pleasant either. During those 10 days, my spirit lingered by Wei Yan. I heard nothing about Zhang Zhao, perhaps exiled, perhaps died in prison, perhaps worse. In any case, not good, my thoughts returned. Eve, drip scattered into the corridor, dampening my sleeve. I took a deep breath, suppressing the churning emotions, and spoke softly. Master Jiang, please come in. Since this was theater, certain things needed stating clearly. I spoke frankly. Borrowing him as a shield was to refuse the second prince's interest. Though we needn't actually consummate the marriage, this public performance had to be flawless. This arrangement carried enormous risk. If he later wished to pursue office, bearing the stigma of offending a prince would likely doom his career. Zhang Zhao listened, expression calm as if hearing someone else's business. He casually waved his sleeve, carelessly saying, "No matter. I failed this year's examination anyway. Whether I am cut out for it remains to be seen." He agreed readily. Cash on delivery, no strings attached. To make the act convincing, I paraded Zhang Zhao around the capital for half a month. One day, seized by whim, I dragged him to the opera, the capital's most popular troupe, performing the latest tormented love melodrama, beloved by noble woman. The gongs had barely sounded before Zhang Zhao, and I exchanged looks and simultaneously set down our teacups. On stage, the climax approached. A destitute scholar knelt weeping, every word dripping blood as he begged his abandoned ex-wife to look at him just once. Purple prose piled thick, the singing voice dragged through 18 meandering curves. Zhang Zhao listened with body tilting slowly backward, Adam's apple struggling as if swallowing a fly. After a long moment, he turned his head, eyes vacant with disbelief. This sort of thing actually sells. I calmly selected osmanthus cake and popped it in my mouth. It does? Why, it is all about the silver. I leaned closer, lowering my voice to reveal the truth. My friend who writes these scripts has already bought a 3-courtyard mansion in the capital from this sort of plot. Zhang Zhao fell silent. Something seemed to shatter in his eyes. Seeing his wounded expression, I felt genuine sympathy and tugged his sleeve to suggest leaving. Instead, he grasped my wrist, touched scalding, then released as if burned. "Listen a bit more." He stared fixedly at the stage, eyes hollow yet determined. "I also want to buy property." So we both sat stone-faced, enduring to the bitter end. Emerging from the theater, both wore matching expressions of hidden pain and exhaustion. The setting sun painted the street ochre. A nondescript green canopied carriage stood quietly roadside. Zhang Zhao suddenly stepped half a pace in front of me. That half step landed perfectly, completely shielding my form. His expression remained normal. He even looked down casually to smooth his sleeve creases, but his voice was low enough only I could hear. "Just keep walking." I obeyed, steps unhesitating. Not until we'd turned the corner, leaving that carriage completely behind, did Zhang Zhao stop. "Was that him?" I didn't respond, tacit confirmation. He added, "Seems you and that person share considerable history." I finally glanced at him. Zhang Zhao faced forward, jawline slightly tense. Eventually, he made a soft "x" sound, troublesome. Despite calling it troublesome, his tone held no fear whatsoever. More like he'd expected this all along, even harboring a hint of youthful eagerness to test himself. "Zhang Zhao," I called his name. He turned to look. "Thank you." He froze briefly, then waved dismissively, though his ears quietly flushed pink. "Taking money, doing work." He looked away at roadside willows. "It is proper." Zhang Zhao had recently become obsessed. He was writing romance novels. I'd collected all the best-selling books on the market for him. Opening any volume revealed the same tired trope: devotion deep as oceans, regret coming too late. When he opened the first book, his posture was upright. By page 3, his spine seemed boneless, slowly collapsing. By the 5th book, he finally couldn't help pressing hard on his throbbing temple. "Must it be written like this?" He pointed at a passage of saccharine. "My lord, please don't leave dialogue, fingertips white with pressure." I nodded honestly. "That is what sells." He fell silent for ages before finally picking up his brush. This writing session became 3 days of torment. Day 1, 800 characters produced, 7 sheets of waste paper torn up. I sat idly nearby cracking melon seeds, shells piling up in the dish. Day 2, he reached the scene where hero and heroine professed love in the rain. The brush tip hovered midair, ink drying without a single stroke falling. I sat opposite, loudly flipping through old account books, each rustle audible. Day 3. Dusk arrived, the setting sun bled red. He finally set down his brush. I also happened to raise my eyes. Window paper filtered warm yellow light, illuminating the defeat, deadening his gaze. We stared at each other in silence for ages. Must this money be earned? He broke the silence first, voice dry and hoarse. I also set down my long cold teacup, throwing the question back. Must this money be earned? These 3 days, just looking at those drafts, felt life shortening. He wrote as if on pins and needles, I read as if choking. Zhang Zhao remained silent, fingertips still stained with wet ink. He slowly crumpled the final draft into a ball and tossed it in the wastebasket. I suddenly realized he lifted his eyelids, eyes regaining clarity. I am not quite that desperate for money. This money isn't absolutely necessary. I added with feeling, besides, this money isn't for just anyone to earn. Even making money required risking one's life. No. After that, Zhang Zhao completely abandoned his literary ambitions, diligently playing Fianc Fei instead. He said the money came easily, just attend to me properly. Out and about, he'd shield me from wind and hold my umbrella at tea houses. He'd pour my tea and arrange dishes. He even knew precisely which pastries in the sweets box weren't too cloying. When acquaintances teased us, I'd say, a Fianc Fei arranged by the family long ago. He'd cooperatively lower his eyes, affecting a bashful manner while standing at my side. Others would offer auspicious phrases like perfectly matched, and he'd feign shyness, ears reddening just right, his acting utterly natural. This news sprouted legs, racing straight into the palace's red walls. The Empress Dowager specifically summoned Mother to the palace, made a few oblique inquiries, bestowed 2 bolts of palace silk, and ceased asking questions. But the Empress couldn't sit still. Her niece, Miss Zhou, suddenly began appearing frequently at Wei Yan's side. Also the censor's daughter, the general's young miss, like spring blossoms blown open by wind. They clustered around Wei Yan in waves. The second prince's consort position. I'd never been the only one eyeing it. Previously, the Empress had favored her own niece, but the Empress Dowager, wary of the Zhou family's power, adamantly refused. Among the noble ladies, I had sufficient status, acceptable appearance, and was the most proactive, burning with devotion. In my previous life's spring banquet, I'd risk my life to save him. The Empress Dowager was pleased. The Empress found no fault. Thus the betrothal proceeded smoothly. No, things were different. I hadn't plunged into that icy lake, and had somehow acquired a Fianc Fei. With the Empress no longer constrained, she naturally wouldn't relent. The day I encountered Wei Yan, I was leading Zhang Zhao to burn incense at an ancient temple outside the city. The temple bustled with worshippers, voices clamoring. Zhang Zhao stared up at the main hall's plaque for ages, then suddenly said, "I'll go draw a fortune lot." For what? Marriage. The words hung in the air, we both froze. Wind swept through the corridors, bronze bells chiming crisply under the eaves. Zhang Zhao was first to look away, voice carrying stubborn justification. The act needs commitment. Understand. I couldn't help smiling. Understood. The Wealth God Hall was packed tight. We couldn't squeeze in. Bored, I accompanied him to the marriage hall instead. Zhang Zhao knelt with utmost propriety, shaking the fortune cylinder with eyes tightly shut, utterly devout. The bamboo lock clattered to the floor. He picked it up, eyebrow twitching almost imperceptibly. Excellent fortune. I leaned over to ask. He quickly crushed the fortune slip into his palm, expression unchanged. No, moderately good. Rising, his steps were noticeably lighter, turning past a scripture pillar. A figure abruptly blocked our path. Wei Yan. The noon sun was somewhat glaring, Buddhist incense swirling. The atmosphere suddenly froze. I smoothed my skirt and bowed, observing perfect etiquette, Second Highness. Wei Yan's gaze settled first on my face, paused one breath, then slowly shifted to Zhang Zhao. Zhang Zhao didn't dodge or avoid, actually stepping half a pace forward. That half step, no more, no less, concealed most of me behind him. Greetings, Your Highness. He cupped his hands, voice clear as jade. Wei Yan didn't even glance at him, eyes still locked on me. "Miss Xue," he began, voice carrying barely detectable hoarseness. "Who is this?" Zhang Zhao straightened before I could answer, responding himself. "Your Highness, my surname is Zhang, given name Zhao." He turned his face toward me, eyes crinkling warmly, smile gentle and harmless. "I am Yishu's fiancé," the words fiancé. He spoke extremely softly, yet enunciated with exceptional clarity. Wei Yan's lashes trembled slightly. He finally looked directly at Zhang Zhao. That gaze was heavy, like a 1,000-ton boulder pressing down inch by inch from his eyes. Zhang Zhao met that intensely oppressive look, smile not diminishing one fraction. He even grew more composed, sleeve shifting slightly as his fingertip lightly brushed the edge of my hanging sleeve. Such a minute gesture. Yet it radiated an intimacy and naturalness outsiders couldn't penetrate. Wei Yan's gaze fixed deadly on that, barely their touch lingered for ages. Incense smoke drifted over, blurring his features. "Master Jiang," Wei Yan began methodically. "Where are you from, Linzhou? What does your family do?" "My parents passed early. They left some poor fields, barely enough to get by. This year's examinations failed." Zhang Zhao answered crisply, even adding a touch of sheepish smile. "Insufficient learning, your Highness's amusement." Question and answer aggressive. Wei Yan seemingly held the upper hand, yet Zhang Zhao simply stood there steadily, neither humble nor arrogant, answering whatever asked, expression consistently gentle and deferential, yet somehow conveying, every punch landed in cotton, soft and yielding, absorbing all force. Wei Yan fell silent briefly. "Miss Xue," he suddenly turned to me, voice lowering. "Might we speak privately?" Zhang Zhao didn't budge. He still blocked me, only tilting his head slightly to inquire my meaning with his eyes. I gently shook my head. "Whatever your Highness wishes to say, say it here." I spoke evenly. Zhang Zhao isn't an outsider. Wei Yan's Adam's apple rolled violently. He looked at Zhang Zhao. Zhang Zhao tactfully lowered his eyes, stepping back a few paces considerately, yet remained within hearing distance of the conversation. That suppressed emotion in Wei Yan's eyes finally spilled over. "Your betrothal." His voice was soft, like fearing to shatter something fragile. "Why didn't you tell me?" I raised my eyes, looking at him calmly. "Your Highness," I said. "My private affairs needn't all be reported to your Highness." Wei Yan stilled briefly, then laughed. Very softly, that laugh didn't reach his eyes, only making his gaze darker and more unfathomable. "Xue Yishu." First time he'd used my full name, each word distinct. "Your taste in men, truly dreadful." Before the words finished, Zhang Zhao suddenly laughed. He laughed lightly, quickly, even with a trace of youthful bashfulness. Then he raised his eyes, meeting Wei Yan's gaze directly, tone utterly sincere. "Your Highness speaks truly. I am indeed ordinary and unremarkable." He paused, lips still curved pleasantly. "But I have one advantage." He turned his face toward me, gaze soft as spring water. "I can make her happy." After parting from Wei Yan, Zhang Zhao and I sought the temple's old monk to interpret his fortune. His crumpled lot finally unfolded. Asterisk clouds veil cold mountains, boat stuck in shallows. When east wind arrives, willows green and flowers fresh. Asterisk, the old monk rambled through circular talk about fate and timing. Zhang Zhao listened with unusual attentiveness. Leaving the hall, the stone steps were slick with mountain mist. He offered a steadying hand, quickly withdrawing once I'd found my footing. "You really offended him just now." I gazed at distant incense smoke curling from braziers. "He is a prince, aren't you afraid of future retribution?" "Don't know why, but seeing him makes me uncomfortable." He paused, seeming to ponder. "Must be astrologically incompatible." Mountain wind swept through corridors, whipping his faded sleeves with snapping sounds. He turned his face, eyes bright and candid. "I have many faults, can't stand being uncomfortable in my own heart." "Never mind." I turned to descend the steps. "The fortune says you lack east wind. Who knows when it'll come?" Footsteps followed unhurriedly behind. Zhang Zhao's voice mixed with the wind, carrying faint laughter. but the east wind has already arrived. I reflexively looked back. He stood 3 steps above. Eve, corner bells swaying gently behind him, fractured sunlight covering his shoulders. A breeze swept up just then, tousling my forehead hair and lifting his blue hair ribbon. Strands and ribbon tangled midair for an instant. My heartbeat skipped without warning. Flustered by this inappropriate moment of distraction, I quickly looked away, but his low laughter reached my ears. The east wind came, Yishu. Zhang Zhao clearly hadn't abandoned his novel, writing obsession. This time he'd learned his lesson. No more trendy angst novels. Instead, he buried himself for 7 days writing wholesome, sweet comfort food. Excitedly submitting the manuscript to a publisher, the proprietor flipped 2 pages before pushing it back. Too bland, the proprietor shook his head, sighing. No conflict, no misunderstandings, won't sell. Zhang Zhao clutched his rejected manuscript like a frost-bitten eggplant sitting on the steps in a daze. Dusk gathered, draping him in solitude. I sat beside him. The stone steps transmitted night's chill. Really want to buy property that badly? He remained silent for ages, long enough for the sky's last glimmer to be devoured. Not necessarily a grand estate. He suddenly spoke, voice soft as if afraid to disturb the night. Just want a place completely my own. I turned to look at him. 17-year-old Zhang Zhao's profile looked especially thin in the dim light, not yet grown into that future court power player, verbally sparring and wielding influence. Right now, he was just an examination failure, a youth with nowhere to turn, simply wanting a place to call home. The softest part of my heart suddenly caved. Zhang Zhao. He turned his face in the darkness. Those eyes shone startlingly bright. I'll open a publishing house for you, I said. He was clearly stunned. Write whatever you want, I continued. If it doesn't sell, just display it for yourself. He blinked, seemingly unable to process this. Heavens, his Adam's apple bobbed. How much silver would that lose? Won't lose. I stood brushing dust from my skirt. A publishing house opened by the Xue family's second miss. Those noble ladies will patronize it for my sake. He also stood, moonlight stretched shadows long across the flagstones. Why? He asked. Wind crossed the courtyard carrying early summer's humid scent. Just consider it. I paused, searching for a lame excuse. I have money burning a hole in my pocket. He laughed. The sound rumbled low from his chest. So I can write what I like now? Yes. The not sweet, not cloying kind too. Yes, he stepped forward. Very close. Close enough I could see myself reflected tiny in his dark eyes. Xue Yishu. He spoke my name, expression solemn as an oath. I'll make you profit. What if you don't? If I don't, he tilted his head, considering, eyes crinkling. I'll mortgage myself to you. The words sounded frivolous, improper. But his eyes were clean and open, natural as commenting on fine weather. I felt somewhat uncomfortable and looked away. Who wants you? With that, I turned toward the house. Footsteps followed again. Unhurried, moonlight merged our shadows, stretching very long, very long. We chose a street facing location for the shop, formerly a struggling cosmetics store. Not large, but an excellent position. Brother entered, hands behind his back, circling twice with appreciative clicks. Xue Yishu, quite the investment. He lowered his voice near my ear. Spent all your saved dowry silver here, didn't you? I kept my head buried in account books, not looking up. Not quite, Zhang Zhao negotiated the price, forced the rent down 20%. Brother made a sound, nudging me with his elbow. I had to look up. He jerked his chin toward the window. Zhang Zhao was climbing a ladder to hang the shop sign. Blue robe sleeves rolled to his elbows, exposing smooth, lean forearms. Afternoon sunlight filtered through window lattices, illuminating his profile with fuzzy warmth. Tell your brother honestly, brother's voice dropped to a whisper. You've really fallen for him. My brush paused on paper, ink immediately bleeding into a small black blot. I didn't answer. Outside, Zhang Zhao seemed to sense something. Looking down, our eyes met. He flashed me a brilliant smile. I hastily lowered my gaze, continuing to fiddle with abacus beads. Fake-click, clack, click, clack. Asterisk one sound, then another. Striking that pool of previously still, dead water in my heart, raising fine, dense ripples that wouldn't settle for ages. Half a month after hanging the sign, Zhang Zhao's novel Fate-Maneering Miss and Pretty Fox Spirit Fei unexpectedly swept the capital. The publishing house's reputation soared. Gradually, people submitted manuscripts. All sweet, cheerful stories that left readers feeling pleased. Readers left with relaxed expressions. Foot traffic increased daily. I gritted my teeth and bought out the neighboring shop too. Knocked through the wall, installed elegant tea seating, specialized in refined pastries and sweet soups. Read books, drink tea, pass the time, everything in one place. Noble ladies loved it. Madams frequently visited too. With crowds came gossip. Heard the Princess Royal recently kept male favorites. 7 of them, all stunningly handsome. The second prince, accompanying the crown prince on inspection tour, had left the capital over a month ago. The third prince's faction was quite active. Most sensational was the Kui family. Lord Kui's mistress had recently caused a scene, and he'd forced his wife to arrange the concubine's formal installation. He'd even declared grandly, "This was a loveless political marriage anyway. If you later meet someone suitable, I'll grant you freedom." Words ringing with righteousness, magnanimous nobility. This very morning, when Lady Kui's male companion was exposed, Lord Kui smashed an entire room of porcelain, making a spectacular scene, now the capital's laughingstock. Zhang Zhao and I listened together, hiding in a corner to gossip quietly, paired with soft pastries. One pot of tea could stretch through half an afternoon. Busyness visibly thrived. Zhang Zhao no longer just wrote novels. Account reconciliation, supply procurement, expansion planning. He picked everything up quickly, managing methodically. Sometimes looking up from ledgers, I'd see him standing at the counter organizing books, profile clean and upright, slender fingertips lightly brushing book spines. We closed late today. After summer rain, the stone pavement glistened wetly, reflecting street lanterns' flickering glow. I said I didn't want the carriage, wanted to walk. Zhang Zhao borrowed an oil paper umbrella post. Rain wind carried a fishy scent mixed with crushed earth and flower, leaf fragrance. He tilted most of the umbrella toward me, leaving half his shoulder in the drizzling mist. I noticed, silently edging half a step toward him. Step mistimed, our arms lightly touched. Warm body heat transmitted through thin fabric. Both paused simultaneously, then with perfect synchronization pretended nothing happened, continuing forward. Night was tranquil, only footsteps audible, his, mine light and heavy, overlapping. That night I dreamed of bamboo forest after spring rain. Spring thunder cracked, shoots burst through earth with popping sounds, everything growing wildly. I chewed over this for 3 days. On the 4th evening, sunset stretched the shop's furnishings into long shadows. Zhang Zhao was buried behind the counter tallying accounts. I strolled over, fingertips lightly tapping the marble surface. Tone utterly casual, Zhang Zhao. Would you like to become my proper husband? His hands moved in smooth rhythm, not even looking up, responding by habit. Sure. Air congealed for 2 breaths. A crisp fey crack, Fey the abacus hand suddenly froze. He jerked up his eyelids, pupils practically seismic. What? I am asking? I patiently broke it down for him. Shall we truly marry, worship heaven and earth, wedding chamber and all? Yes or no? Visibly flush burned from his ears straight down his neck, like someone had splashed rouge over him. That abacus bead pinched between his fingers finally slipped loose, tumbling through the gap and striking the blue brick floor with a heart-stopping chime. He fumbled, bending to retrieve it, rising too quickly, forehead cracking hard against the rosewood counter corner, with a dull thud, rubbing his temple while straightening, eyes darting everywhere, ceiling beams, brush stand, anywhere but me. After ages of hemming, his throat squeezed out barely audible breath, awkward beyond recognition from his usual crisp manner. That won't work, I froze, heart sinking. What, you look down on me? No. He whipped around urgently, eyes wide as saucers, waving frantically. I wouldn't dare. Then why? His fingers dug into the counter edge, knuckles white with force. Right now, I am strapped for cash. So that was it. I exhaled completely, waving dismissively. I have money. What is mine is yours. But he shook his head, that stubborn streak emerging. It is not the same. Then tell me, what would make it the same? This time he went completely mute, eyelids lowered, thick lashes casting small raven, blue shadows on his cheeks. After forever, long enough outside market sounds seemed distant, he finally murmured, "Wait for me, how long?" Soon, fine. I wouldn't push him too hard. Just didn't expect those words would crack like a whip over Zhang Zhao. His share of publishing house profits. He kept not one coin, immediately reinvesting everything into business ventures. Tea, silk, southern goods traded north. Any profitable enterprise he'd attempt. Days he greeted customers at the shop. Nights he attacked account books by lamplight. Soon enough, faint bruising shadowed his eyes. I couldn't bear watching, finally asking, "The examination path, you've completely abandoned it." He was staring blankly at accounts, brush tip freezing at my words. Ink dripped from the bristles, bleeding into a pitch, black pool on the paper. He looked up, expression oddly desolate. Recently, I had a dream. He set down his brush, wearily rubbing his brow. In it, I stumbled into officialdom but never gained favor. Colleagues ostracized me, superiors suppressed me, grayed my hair, wasted 10 years, ended up merely a 6th-rank minor official. An extremely soft sigh escaped his lips. I'd thought scholarly success and office would grant me advancement. But that dream life, he smiled bitterly, shaking his head. Too stifling, too humiliating. I fell silent, not pressing further. No one expected Zhang Zhao to actually have a knack for business. Within half a year, he'd genuinely purchased property in the capital. A 3 courtyard residence. Excellent location. Just one street from the Xue estate. Blue brick, black tiles, deep courtyards, radiating refined elegance. The day he brought me to view it, he pointed things out, voice dropping lower and lower. Naturally can't compare to the Xue estate's grandeur. I fear you'll be inconvenienced hereafter. I shook my head, not inconvenienced. Still he fretted, the garden isn't spacious enough either. Summer cooling might be inadequate, and this corridor, unable to bear this self-deprecation. I turned and wrapped my arms around his waist. His body stiffened, instantly silent. Only autumn wind, rustling dead leaves remained audible. I buried my face in his broad shoulder, mentally calculating, the deed bore my name. This house contained his beauty. I'd acquired both wealth and charm. Where was the inconvenience? Eventually his arms slowly encircled me, tightening progressively, as if trying to meld me into his bones. Warm breath brushed my crown, carrying barely perceptible trembling. Before winter, Zhang Zhao engaged the capital's finest matchmaker. He formally called at the Xue estate, spreading his entire assets before my parents for inspection. Facing their scrutinizing gazes, his eyes remained clean and candid as a clear spring. This junior dares not promise Miss Yishu boundless riches. But as long as I draw breath, this life, I'll never let her suffer the slightest grievance. Words settled. The room fell utterly silent. Father slowly closed the ledger in his hands. "Have you set a date?" he asked. Zhang Zhao replied respectfully. "Entirely at your discretion, elders." But his peripheral vision had already involuntarily drifted toward me. That gaze clearly asked, "And you? When do you wish to marry me?" I lifted my chin, smiling brilliantly. "Let's say early spring. Weather's fine then." I loved spring, everything reviving, full of promise. The next news of Wei Yan came near year's end. The crown prince was ambushed en route back to the capital. Wei Yan took an arrow meant for the crown prince, struck critically, gravely endangered. The emperor erupted in fury, issuing thunderous decrees for thorough investigation. Seemed Wei Yan's post. Rebirth maneuvers had stirred too much, finally provoking hidden forces. That assassination targeting the crown prince in my previous life had advanced. Because of this, streets and alleys buzzed, saying the second prince nearly met King Yama this time. 3 days later, the second prince's residence sent a card. Wei Yan had awakened, specifically requesting to see me. Zhang Zhao was tying my cloak just then, slender fingers winding the crimson satin ribbon round and round. Perfect timing. His voice was flatly neutral, revealing nothing. Deliver him a wedding invitation while you are at it. The sash pulled rather tight. I had to tilt my head back for air. Seizing his distraction, I rose on tiptoes and planted a quick kiss on his pressed lips. Come with me. He froze completely, that familiar flush instantly conquering his ears. Glaring at me, he finally managed. Hooligan. I laughed, leaning closer, eyes crinkling. Oh my, we're engaged already. What hooligan? Not hooligan. This is called romance. Completely deflated. He pressed his lips together and obediently loosened the sash for me. Entering that room, Wei Yan was half reclined against the headboard. The chamber had dismissed servants. Heavy medicine smell mixed with incense pressed oppressively down. I selected a round stool some distance from him and casually plucked an orange from the fruit dish on the side table. Nails pierced orange skin. Fine mist bursting forth, coating fingertips with slightly astringent fragrance. Wei Yan spoke, voice hoarse. He said he'd also returned at the spring banquet. He'd soaked in that icy lake for ages. Cold penetrated like needles into bone crevices. Palace servants tried pulling him out. He stopped them. He'd thought, wait a bit longer. Perhaps she'll come. But until consciousness blurred, limbs stiffened. The shore remained empty. No familiar figure appeared. In that moment he'd thought, it is over. If I didn't save him, given the Empress's temperament, she'd never relent. This marriage would be impossible. But then reconsidering, also good. Why not seize this opportunity to clean up the previous life's messes first? This time his brother wouldn't be assassinated and die young, wouldn't have to ascend prematurely. He himself needn't be forced onto that frigid throne. He spoke extremely slowly, each word seeming ground painfully from cracked lips. He said he'd request a favor from Father Emperor and the Crown Prince. No fief, no power, just one chance for a proper match. He said this life held no 3,000. Beauty harem, no treacherous court politics. None of those women he'd been forced to take. No compromises he'd been forced to make. He said this life would be just the two of us. Whatever I wanted, my orange. Peeling hand paused. Something was wrong, not about the throne, not about others. Actually, I'd wondered if he hadn't become emperor, would things between us have differed? Wondered many times. Final conclusion, a leopard can't change its spots. The throne was merely a magnifying glass, widening cracks between us. However, many external factors, the rot festered in our very bones, we'd been fatally attracted to each other's opposite natures. Love and loathing spring from the same root. He loved my vibrant passion, yet resented my clamor. I admired his thorough composure, yet hated his emotional coldness. When love ran deep, those differences were complementary. When fate ended, they became perpetually incompatible. Mutual torment, grinding out blood, grinding out resentment, until finally even that initial spark became supreme irony. I methodically finished peeling the orange, stripping even the pith clean, tasted a segment too sour, unpalatable. February 18th, Zhang Zhao and I marry. If you can stand by then, come watch. Words dropped into dead air, light and weightless, yet each one piercing. Wei Yan stared blankly for ages, as if unable to comprehend human speech, mist in his eyes condensing, then dissipating, leaving only desolation. His lips moved, seemingly wanting to say something to make me stay, but only a broken gasp escaped. I rose, returning the single bite orange to the table. Turning to leave, a dull thud sounded behind me. Looking back, he'd struggled to rise and follow, but his upper body had pitched gracelessly over the bed's edge. His elbow cracked heavily against the floor, the thud containing an extremely low hiss of pain. He didn't raise his head. Voice squeezed through disheveled hair carrying a sob. Xue Yishu, are you still hating me? Initially, yes, I'd hated his concubines, his silence, hated how court politics always came first while I ranked last. Hatred, I discovered that besides hating, I could do nothing else. Ordinary couples who couldn't continue could divorce, each finding their own path, but in my previous life, I was Empress escape route. What escape route existed? Any layers of palace towers, piled gold and jade, all cages imprisoning me to death. I could hardly actually stab him, then end myself. Besides, hating someone was exhausting, required gritting teeth day and night, never sleeping soundly, required repeatedly peeling open old scars, examining bloodily, watching them fester, suppurate, scab over, then get viciously slashed open anew. In my previous life, I'd sustained myself on hatred, enduring in the palace day after day, finally worked myself to death. This life I had spring to anticipate. Why carry that heavy word hate through life again? I looked at his prostrate figure, arms trembling, forehead hair messily veiling his features. That posture utterly wretched, even somewhat pitiable. But my heart held only water, like calm. Wei Yan, I don't hate you anymore. Finished speaking, I turned and left without looking back. Stepping through the doorway, brilliant daylight struck painfully. Zhang Zhao waited outside the estate gates, shoulders bearing scattered snowflakes. Didn't know how long he'd stood there, hearing footsteps. He whipped around, gaze sweeping me head to toe like a hook, confirming I was fine, not a hair harmed. Those taut shoulders finally gradually relaxed. Finished talking, he strode over, naturally tucking a pre-warmed hand warmer into my palms. Let's go home. February 18th, auspicious for weddings, spring glorious. 10 miles of red bridal procession, guests filling the hall, at the banquet. Zhang Zhao refused not one toast, accepting all comers' first cup. Zhang Zhao raised his cup smiling, responding gracefully, quite the dignified groom. Second cup, ears flushed crimson, speech diminished, but still steady. Third cup he swayed, pitching straight into my arms. The entire gathering fell silent. Brother froze midair, holding the wine pot, gaping. He is down already. I was stunned too. No wonder in my previous life at palace banquets. He never touched alcohol. Clearly a 1-cup lightweight. I half supported half, dragged him back to the bridal chamber, him clutching my sleeve the entire way, refusing to release it even unto death. Once inside with no witnesses, he completely attached himself. Arms locked around my waist, refusing to let go. Entire person draped over my shoulder like a large dog, feverish cheek nuzzling my neck. His breath reeked of wine mixed with that clean soapery fragrance from his body, surprisingly not unpleasant. Xue Yishu, his voice muffled against my clothes, slurred yet carrying childish stubbornness. Now I am your person. Paused, then added softly, you must treat me well. He squeezed me breathless. I couldn't help laughing, palm stroking his sweat, dampened nape. I will, I coaxed gently. Unsatisfied, he shook his head, nuzzling until my neck tickled. Not sincere enough. He lifted his face, eyes misted with alcohol, shimmering, staring straight at me. Say it again. I sighed helplessly, asking how to show proper sincerity. He suddenly fell silent, just stared fixedly at me, that ear flush slowly spreading, dyeing his entire face spring colors. Candlelight danced in his jet eyes, softening hearts. After ages, he spoke extremely softly, kiss me once. Voice dropping into silent night like a feather brushing palms, tingling. I hesitated, seeing my delayed response, his lashes slowly lowered, lips pursing aggrievedly. That drunken bravado faded, revealing hidden anxiety and insecurity beneath. I lowered my head and kissed him, very lightly pressed against his warm, soft lips. Just an instant before separating, he froze, eyes wide and round, unblinking, as if under a binding spell, breath held, even chest movement ceased. Then, very slowly, he blinked once, blinked again, mouth corners gradually, gradually curving into an unhideable, foolishly contented arc. He suddenly buried his face back in my shoulder, giggling, shoulders trembling lightly with laughter, laughed enough, then raised his head again. Eyes reflecting two small candle flames, startlingly bright. Sealed, he muttered quietly. Fingertips secretly hooking my finger. Can't escape now. Outside, spring night deepened. Occasionally falling blossoms brushed window lattices with soft sounds. I clasped his hand in return, fingers interlacing. I answered softly, can't escape. The day Wei Yan left the capital was unexpectedly clear. The third prince's faction had made the move, already cleanly dealt with. On the crown prince's side, having survived this ordeal, no further mishaps would occur. Wei Yan had requested northern frontier military oversight. Oversight in name, self-exile in reality. The memorial went up, the emperor brooded briefly, finally approving, departing with minimal entourage, only 3 or 5 close attendants. Reaching the towering city gates, wind suddenly gusted, lifting a carriage curtain corner. He raised his hand, pale knuckles pressing the curtain edge, hesitating to release it. City walls soared into clouds, people tiny as ants. This spring capital, clamorous, vivid, retreated inch by inch into blurred background. He gazed for ages until fingertips blanched, eyes growing dry. The curtain finally fell, severing that last glimpse of the mortal world. And I, at that moment, was leisurely stealing half a day's peace with Zhang Zhao at home. We'd set up a spring daybed in the garden, lazily reading new novels. Sunlight spilled over branches, fine fragmented light, spots scattered across my open book pages. Zhang Zhao reclined beside me, drowsy. A breeze passed, pear blossoms cascading down in snowy white, covering him completely. In his dream he seemed to frown, unconsciously pressing closer toward me. I brushed flower petals from his temple, gently turning another page. The story had reached its most perfect conclusion, scholar and beauty, happily united. I closed the book, present world peaceful. Years stretching long, spring so beautiful time to brew this year's peach blossom wine. Love, the inexplicable force in this world. Some die for it, others sever all ties because of it. 10 years of marriage in a past life reduced to 8 bitter words. Looking back, neither was truly at fault. Wei Yan was born to be emperor. Court politics, harem dynamics, each a chain around his neck. And Xue Yishu, a vibrant soul caged within palace walls, watching her husband take one consort after another. How could she not grow bitter? But perhaps some people are only meant to walk beside us briefly. Some connections are best left as what-ifs and might-have beens.